Thank you, Nicola. Thank you, Nicola, for inviting me actually for this webinar. Thank you, all of you, to be connected to this webinar today, which is dedicated to supply chain and supply chain management. At HEC, I have the chance to meet a lot of participants in programs we deliver. And in those programs, we have participants from manufacturing companies, so companies producing tangible products. But we have as well a lot of participants coming from service industry. And we have banking, insurance, legal firms, consulting firms, software company, and whatever. So I would propose you first, just to have a flavor about the quality of the audience, a poll. And you will have the possibility, Florent, to propose this poll and then to choose if you work for today a manufacturing company or if you work for a service organization. So Florent, you can launch the poll.
Yes, absolutely. I'm having a slight difficulty, but I'm gonna try right now.
No problem. Great. So you can start voting.
There it is.
Yeah, great. Let's go. Okay, so I say that this is the typical breakdown of participants at HEC program. So we can stop here, yeah. So that's fine. So this here, we have 1/3 of participants here working for manufacturing organizations, and we have 2/3 working for service companies. So the good news is, when we talk about supply chain management, all concepts, except maybe inventories, can be applied to a service industry. So people who work for a service industry, you don't waste your time. You can really attend to this webinar. A second poll, just to introduce the topic of today, is just to test your awareness about what supply chain management is. You have 3 possibilities to choose. For you, the mission, the fundamental mission of supply chain management, what is it? Is it to serve customers and fulfill their demand? Is it to secure supplies of raw materials, components, and semi-finished goods? Or is it to reconcile supply and demand? Let's start. Interesting. There is a competition. Seems to be, but there is a winner in terms of the possibilities of choice. Okay, we can stop here, Florent. Well, the first takeaway of this webinar is clear. If there is one word to keep in mind for the rest of your life in terms of supply chain management, the key word is customer. This is a problem because when we talk about supply chain management, we turn our face to suppliers. The problem is the purpose of supply chain management is to fulfill demand of the market and customers. And it could be to fulfill what a patient in the hospital needs. So the first mission, essential one, is definitely to serve customers. The 2 others are true as well, of course. So the purpose is to reconcile supply and demand. I'm going to go into details in that topic, of course, and we have to secure the supplies of raw materials as well. Okay, but keep in mind the main purpose is to serve customers. Now the agenda of this webinar is the following. The first point, and I think the last poll is clear. The first part will be dedicated to define words. When we talk about supply chain management, we have to be very clear about what are we talking about. The second is currently we have 4 phases. We have, I would say, the old normal. We have the COVID-19 phase. This is where we are today, at least in my country, in France. And then we have the recovery phase. And this is what we have today, for instance, in China, according to information we have got. And then we have the new normal, which is the phase number 4. So the main focus of this webinar is to define what are the main differences between the old normal and the new normal, and what are the major stakes we have to cover. So in order to cover this objective, I would like to define 3 words. Now, first point, what a supply chain is. Here you have let's say a graph representing the different steps. So a supply chain is made of activities. It's made of operations. It's made of players. So you can see here that we have an upstream part of the supply chain. We can call it the supply side of the supply chain. And then here, the downstream part, this is the part of the supply chain which is connected to the customers and the consumers. And in the middle, you have your own organization. This is the internal supply chain organization. And internally, within the company, the major activities, the major players are purchasing, production, and sales. And even production can be fragmented. Your own production system can be fragmented in different facilities. You may have production step 1 in China, production step 2 in Morocco, and then post-manufacturing, that means finishing, customizing, personalizing the product for a customer, maybe in Germany. So as you can see here, every player in a value chain is a part of a supply chain. When you design a supply chain model, what I call a supply chain model, this supply chain model derives from your business model. And we had the past webinar with one of my colleagues, and she introduced the notion of business model and value proposition and value architecture. A supply chain model, by essence, is a big building block of a business model. And when you design a value chain, you have to answer some questions. The first question is what? What do we decide to produce on our own? And what do we decide to make versus buy? Where? Where do we decide to produce? Where do we decide to supply? From which sources? In which countries? Where? It's as well which customer channels we decide to sell our products, you know? So we can sell by online, we can sell to supermarkets, we can sell by drive solution, whatever. Who does what? So which players you decide to work with, you decide to partner, and how do you produce it? So this is a choice of technology you put, and especially, let's say, smart automation, for instance, you decide to put within your supply chain. So to characterize a supply chain, number 1, a supply chain can be fragmented or can be integrated. So fragmentation is measured by the number of players and the number of interfaces. The second characteristic is a supply chain can be local or can be global. You may have suppliers locally based, you may have your customers locally based, and you may have your own operations at the local level. So the supply chain pattern could be local to local, that means suppliers locally based and your customers locally based, local to local. But a supply chain can be local to global or global to local, or even the more complex is a global supply chain. So everything is global. I would like, as a conclusion of this slide, that to keep in mind, the more fragmented, the more global your supply chain is, the more complex the supply chain management is. And this is a transition to the next slide.
Michel, excuse me.
Yeah.
Sorry, this is Florent speaking.
Yeah.
Could we just interrupt your sharing of your screen, because some participants are letting us know that they're having difficulty to see it. So I'm going to stop your sharing and I'm going to ask you to reshare your presentation just to see if that fixed the problem, please. Sorry to interrupt.
No problem. We are talking about agile supply chain. So agility is a key dimension of how to manage a supply chain. So.
Thank you, Michel. So I stopped your presentation. So if you can just redo the screen share option and reshare your presentation that you were doing.
Of course, here we go. Yeah.
Yeah, that fixed the problem for me on my presenters. Thank you so much.
Thank you for your support, Florent. So then a supply chain management is how you manage your supply chain. And the supply chain management model is based on two sides. You have the demand side and you have the supply side. In the demand side, fundamentally, you have to formalize the offer. You decide to push to your customers. And an offer is made of both products and services. The second activity of supply chain management fundamentally is to forecast demand. You have to plan demand. You have to anticipate what you have to serve in the future for customers in the coming months, in the coming quarters. So this is the demand side of my supply chain management model. The second side is the supply side. And the supply side, fundamentally, you plan production, you plan procurement, and you plan logistics. Logistics means you have to book trucks, you have to book containers, you have to book, if you decide to have air freight, you have to book your airplanes with the airlines. The purpose of supply chain management fundamentally is to connect the demand side and the supply side. That means, and the major process to do that is what we call the SNOP, the Sales and Operations Planning. So as a takeaway of this slide, the supply chain management fundamentally is a monitoring process enabling you to manage whatever your supply chain is. The value supply chain management can provide, we have 5 axes of value. And my advice is, before a crisis, you should be very clear about what is your value roadmap. What do you decide to focus on in terms of value creation? And you have 5 possibilities. Either you decide to focus on customer offer and customer satisfaction. You are obsessed by customers. And the purpose, the mission of supply chain management is to provide and to fulfill satisfaction to customer. Or you could decide to focus on cost and the famous cost to serve. If you decide that your leadership is based in the market on providing value for money, consequently, you have to do your best in supply chain management to decrease cost, transportation, production, supply, whatever. Or you could decide to focus on cash. That means you have to pay a lot of attention to stocks. On the previous slide, I didn't mention it, but you saw a stock, a house, and in the supply chain models as well, we have stocks everywhere, potentially raw materials, semi-finished goods, and finished goods. Or you could decide to use supply chain management to get a high return of your investment and then to better manage your assets. That means your machines, your factories, your logistics warehouses, and so on and so on. Or you could decide to focus your energy in terms of supply chain management to deliver a value related to sustainability. And sustainability means 3 Ps. The people, so safety, for instance, the planet, respecting the planet, so to have a low carbon footprint impact from supply chain management, and then the last one is a profit. Keep in mind, so it's very rich, but you have to make a choice. If you don't make a choice, it's not clear. And when you face a crisis, like this crisis, you are lost. So and of course, the priorities are different if you are old normal, COVID-19 crisis, recovery, and the new normal. So the value roadmap is different. So I have now a poll to you to ask you, could you please make a choice within those 5 pillars and to tell me currently, so today, I would say today, old normal. I mean, what are your priorities in your own organization? Is it your priority customer satisfaction? Is it the cost? Is it the cash? Is it to get the best return of your assets? Or is it sustainability? So Florent, you can put the poll. Let's go. Okay, we can stop here. So the first priority is customer satisfaction. So actually you learn something. So in the first poll, you say, yeah, this is reconcile supply and demand. And now you answer in terms of value creation. My first objective is to provide the promise of service and products to my customers. So I think this is a great answer, okay? And we see here afterwards, this is cash, which is number 2. And then we have the last 3, which is sustainability and cost, and then assets. Great, thanks for your answers. Now, takeaway of this part 1. The takeaway is, roughly speaking, and this is based on my experience, the overall awareness about supply chain and supply chain management is quite weak. And most management teams discover those topics when their company faces a crisis, and that's too late. The second point is supply chain management performance relies on a seamless connection of the demand to the supply. So when we talk about supply, we should start from demand analysis. How do you want to fulfill demand? How do you want to manage supply if you are not able to connect both? And the third takeaway is supply chain management is a very cross-functional process. It's an end-to-end process covering external players, internal players. And this is, in my opinion, the best way to execute your strategy. And then I will provide some illustration. So now we move to part 2. So part 2 is what could be the new normal environment and how supply chain management can support it. Personally, at that stage, and as Nicolas said in his introduction, to be honest, every day we learn something. Today, I consider that we have 3 major elements concerning the new normal. The number 1 is probably demand pattern evolution. What I mean by that is 2 things. Number 1 is the qualitative demand. That means I think we have to work on what are the key expectations of the customers in terms of demand. And I come back to that afterwards. The second point is the volume of the demand and volatility and uncertainty. So I guess we are going to face a higher volatility and uncertainty regarding demand pattern. The second one is probably, and we have a poll in the future for you to score those 5 pillars. Do we consider that customer satisfaction is still number 1 priority? Do we consider another one? I will ask you, for instance, but I guess some changes in the future, and definitely cash limit. So key questions are clearly which priorities in terms of value creation. Number 2, which supply chain model and models, because maybe we have to invent different models. And which solutions, and this is 2 words in the title of this webinar, to develop an agile and resilient supply chain. So to introduce that, I propose you a new poll, which is the same you have just done a few minutes ago. And I will ask you to answer the same question, but for the new normal. Do you consider that in the new normal, post-crisis and post-recovery, what is your choice in terms of priority or in terms of supply chain value management, value creation? So Florent, you can start the poll. Is it customer satisfaction? Is it cost? Is it cash? Is it assets utilization? And is it sustainability? Very interesting. Oh, there is a tough competition. Great. We can stop here. We can stop here. Thank you, Florent. Hey, things are changing. It seems that customer satisfaction is maybe priority 1, priority 2, but in competition with sustainability. Sustainability means what? We have to take care of people, we have to take care of the planet, and we have to mitigate the risks. Because probably in the future, we are going to face more and more issues as we are facing today. And to make sure our business model is robust enough and supply chain management can be able to support this business model, you know, and then to have a sustainable profit. Thank you for your input. This is quite interesting. I could do a research on that in the future and just to invest more. Now, I propose you a second poll before I go to, let's say, solutions. In your opinion, in a new normal environment, what should be the main priority? Will you be deciding to invest in smart automation? Are you going to push to relocate suppliers and production facilities? That means fundamentally to leave China, India, Southeast Asia, for instance, Mexico, I don't know, and then to go back for European countries, if you are Europeans, of course. To develop digital solutions, so to invest money in the famous 4.0 supply chain solutions, or to redefine customer offer. Let's go. Interesting. Oh, automation is not very much selected, huh? Oh, okay. Interesting. We can stop the poll here. Okay. So the winner is develop digital solutions. I would agree on that. And then we have relocate. Relocate production and supplies. I'm not so sure, to be honest. I will not provide, I would say, solutions on that topic because we have to consider industry by industry. And redefine customer offer, yes, definitely. I'm going to start with that. Thank you for input. And then I go back to almost my last slide of my presentation. It's a heavy one, and this is, I would say, my current recommendation and my current understanding about what we should do in the future in supply chain management. 1 principle and 5 priorities. The principle is to work on whatever you can do to reconnect or to connect demand to supply. We have today too many supply chains. We have too many supply chain management organizations within companies where you have silos. And you have a lack of cooperation between people, marketing people, supplying, procuring, purchasing, producing, selling, and so on. It's a fragmented supply chain model and supply chain management organization. So I do believe very strongly that if you want to be agile and if you want to be resilient, the closer you connect demand and supply, the more agile and the more resilient you are going to be. The second point is, I hope that I inspired you in terms of supply chain management is a great leverage to connect strategy, that means my business model, in a way I would say, to operations. We see today, you know, deliveries of masks, and we see aircraft, Antonov airplanes, the Russian airplane with the big pallets, and so on. This is operations. But are we sure that we have a proper supply chain management organization to plan activities, to work as a control tower of those flows of products? And are we sure before we had a proper strategy, deciding the right supply chain model to work on that? I'm not sure at all on that. So my principle is use supply chain management to connect your strategy, challenge your strategy, and then to connect it to operations. Now, specific solutions, practical ones. I have a lot of them, but then I selected 5. Number 1, we have, in terms of connection, demand to supply, we have to work on designing fair offer. A fair offer to customer means no more, no less. And my colleague last time in the webinar on business model said the same. In the value proposition, we have to work on designing offer in order to fulfill the needs of the customers, no more, no less. Because if you exceed by providing extra services, the cost of that is unacceptable. And then you have to choose the supply chain capabilities in terms of cost and risks to serve those customers. So the first connecting leverage is to work on the definition of an offer to the customers. And I expect, I smell, probably we have to work collaboratively with marketing, with product development, and so on, and salespeople to redefine what a fair offer has to be. The second axis, I definitely believe that because of volatility, because of uncertainty, we have to develop our capability of simulation and optimization. We have to test and to simulate supply chain model scenarios. And I put number 2, and I put it in red, the same color as this one, because the red here on that slide means strategic level. Customer offer design, it's strategic. Modeling supply chain models and deciding make or buy local, global suppliers, and so on, this is strategy. This is value chain design. But for doing that, we need to have mathematical tools to model those scenarios, and not only in volume. We have to do it in euros, dollars, whatever the currency is. We have to do it in finance. The third, let's say, axis to reinforce, and I would say visionary companies many years ago invested in very agile S&OP process, and to have not only a monthly S&OP process, but even a weekly S&OP process in a crisis mode. In a normal area, monthly one is enough. But when you face, and this is what I see with the companies today, what is the future now in the crisis mode? Is it 3 months, 4 months? No, it's tomorrow, it's next week. So we need capability of simulating, modeling scenarios to reconcile demand and supply and to meet the demand with the best use of capabilities. The third axis, this is invest in the digital. And this is based on the poll we have done with you. I do believe that digitalization of supply chain management will be growing a lot in the future. It started already, of course, but with this crisis, the digital transformation of supply chains is going to be much, much quicker and faster. The solution number 4 is, for me, if you want to be agile, if you want to be resilient, you need to get accurate, real-time information on what happens. We need to know what happens. What is the performance of my supplier? What is the delivery of a pallet with a truck with this customer? This customer has been delivered, yes or no? Do we have organized an advanced shipment notification to this customer? So we need to have data on a real time to make now a decision for actions we have to execute tomorrow or after tomorrow. And I do believe, and this is probably something new, this is the last one here, this is definitely to integrate tactical and operational planning. State of the art, tactical planning is 18 to 24 months ahead. Operational planning is, let's say, a month, max 3 months. And today we need to reconcile them. It's not 2 layers of planning disconnected. We have to reconnect. We have, in that case, I will tell you, not to reconnect, to connect. Because today, very rare are companies which are able to really connect and to cascade down, I would say, the tactical planning with the operational planning. So this is at that stage, and very modestly, because again, I can tell you, a lot of people today are talking about supply chain management, developments, whatever. So a lot of ideas, and every day things are changing, even in my mind. But I would say I share with you on time, on real time, my current perception, I would say, of the principle to push, to convince top managers, and then the main solutions I would recommend to implement. My conclusion is, I think we have to make our best to convince management teams that supply chain management as the most cross-functional process of a company is a great leverage to link strategy, tactical, and operational decisions. And we have definitely to make this link closer and much more efficient. And this is the gateway, I think, for a more agile and a stronger, resilient supply chain. And my last word is about people. I talk a lot about digital solutions, but fundamentally, a supply chain management works with people, people planning, people operating, and so on, people serving customers. And I mentioned before that because of those 5 pillars, sometimes in the management team, you have sales pushing like this, marketing pushing like this, production people pushing in that direction. And a value supply chain management can provide is to build up a united team. That means a team aligned with a common understanding, a common vision regarding what's the value we decide to deliver to our ecosystem. So my last word is about transformation of the organizations in the new normal regarding the behavior of people, their collaborative spirit, and I use this word at purpose, which is united team. So this is my last word regarding the future, which is a hope that supply chain management has a great future based on technical solutions, but as well on people. Thank you so much for your attention, and I hope those few words were able to inspire you. And I'm ready now for Q&A session.
Thank you very much, Michel. I think I like your conclusion about united teams. This is something really important and which resonates a lot in my mind. We have many questions, as you can imagine, because this topic is of paramount importance. And the first question is coming from Germany, and it's Helmut, who is asking you, do you consider supply chains should be simplified in order to simplify supply chain management and get as such a higher agility and a stronger resilience? So we're talking here about simplification of supply chains to simplify supply chain management.
The notion of simplification is a very important notion. This is many years ago, many companies started working on lean, not only lean operations, but as well about lean supply chain organizations. And we could assume that, as I said, the simpler you are, the more agile and the more resilient you have. Actually, I think the answer is not so easy. I think in some cases, complexity is a competitive advantage. You may decide to offer to your customers a broad range of products, and it makes your life in terms of supply chain management much more complex. So your supply chain is more complex too, and your supply chain management is complex too as well. But it's a good reason if your strategy is to make a difference against your competitors by offering a large portfolio of products. So my first part of the answer is this question of simplification versus complexity should be, let's say, addressed through a strategic analysis. So this is really your strategic market positioning, which should decide at which level of complexity you have to be. This is like cholesterol. You have good cholesterol and you have bad cholesterol. So keep the good cholesterol. So keep the good complexity and just avoid bad cholesterol. Now, the second point is whatever your strategy is, there is a word I like, and I have been working a lot with a specific company on that, and probably some of them are connected to this webinar, is what I call streamline. Streamline is definitely a way to connect different players. And then you hear the word streamline. That means fundamentally to to get faster flows, to have aligned teams, and so on and so on. So for me, if you want to be agile, connecting people to higher your responsiveness to events is something important. For the resilience, it's another topic. For the resilience, yes, probably simplification is a very good way to get a stronger resilience.
Thank you, Michel. We've got another question, which is coming from Jessica in the US. And she's asking you if demand planning remains relevant to perform as we know, the demand becomes more and more uncertain.
It's a good question, actually. It's a good one. For sure, when we talk about volatility, we talk about uncertainty, so fluctuations in sales volume and so on. We may have a position saying it's useless to keep on planning demand and forecasting and to invest money in a highly sophisticated software solution and so on. Demand planning, we have to be very clear. Demand planning means one thing, which is tactically planning demand. So planning or tactical demand means anticipating the trends, anticipating the seasonality, anticipating some, let's say, fluctuations. And for that purpose, demand planning is very useful. And then I would say formalizing assumptions regarding the demand evolution, I mean, it's very useful. But now, concerning the short term, what happens tomorrow, what happens next week, what is going to happen in 2 or 3 weeks, that's another matter of things. And now you have new generation of software solutions called demand sensing. You know, you hear demand sensing, like demand sensors. So it's based on cloud technology, based on different types of technologies. But then the idea is to capture, and this is what I called before, I would say, get accurate data and visibility on events. And then you have this new generation of solutions capturing those data. But again, to have the same planning exercise concerning, let's say, tactical level and operational level. So yes, the answer is, even if it's more and more difficult to plan demand, because uncertainty is there, this is why we have to plan demand and then to make assumptions.
Thank you, Michel. The next question is actually a question that I wanted to ask you anyway, but which is also asked by Anne in Ireland. And she's asking, and I am asking you, is the local supply chain model the solution to recommend for the future?
You know, there is today a sort of, let's say, political speech, globally speaking, and it's not only, let's say, my country or other countries, but it's obvious, it's absolutely obvious that many countries have closed their borders to avoid, let's say, sick people to just coming into those countries. But I don't believe in all cases to build up and then to animate and work on local supply chain solutions is the right approach. My answer, and sorry if my answer maybe dissatisfied you, but it depends. It depends on the service you want to offer to customer. It depends on the value of the product. So if you have a low value versus high value, it depends on volatility. It depends on, are we working on, let's say, volatile market or not volatile market? Depends on volatility of supply. So, you know, so it's a multi-dimensional factor analysis to make a decision. So the answer is probably you need to have in your own company concurrent, that means parallel supply chain models. Today already you have some companies working with 4 different generic supply chain models according to those factors I started listed with you.
Thank you, Michel. It makes the thing clearer. You didn't talk, and that's a question coming from India, actually. You didn't talk a lot about logistics. What, in this new environment, in this new normal, what is or what will be the role of logistics?
I decided in my webinar to focus on only two definitions. So one was supply chain. I hope I was clear. And one about supply chain management. I hope I was clear too. And I decided not to talk about logistics. You are right. Logistics is something else. You see here on this slide, you have airplanes, you have boats, vessels, you have trains, you have containers, you have barcode, you have a warehouse here, you have handling operations. So actually what you have on this slide, and you have trucks, what you have here is what we call logistics. So logistics is just, this is not negative, but logistics is just the execution of operations. But if you want to properly execute the right operations, to choose the right means of transportation, for instance, to have the right warehouse solution, is it an automated like Amazon with Kiva system solution or whatever? These logistics, those logistics solutions have to be the consequence of your supply chain model. So I decided not to talk too much about, let's say, logistics, because this is more technical solutions. They are very, very important to consider. And when we talk about digitalization of supply chain, we talk about, let's say, IT, data, and we talk as well about smart automation. So this is, of course, a key dimension of the topic today. But for me, it's not the first one. The first one definitely is to design properly your supply chain model. And second step, to define how you are going to manage this supply chain. We have the resources and the means today in terms of logistics solutions. We have it, I would say. So the problem today is not this one.
Okay, a really final question, which is asked by Marie, she is asking you maybe to characterize a little bit more the old normal and what we will undoubtedly face, which is the new normal. How would you characterize that from a supply chain perspective?
Well, I have the project actually to write an article. So it's a question which helps me to put some, let's say, content on that topic. For me, the first starting point is awareness of management team. And I do consider that HEC, we have a role to play. And this is a message to you, Nicolas, I would say. We have to educate, and this is what we do actually in the program where I teach those management team people, to make them aware, as we did today, for instance, through this webinar, to explain to them that through supply chain management is not, the problem is not to avoid a problem, a crisis. No, the point is to work on the value we can generate for a sustainable company. So it's a big shift in terms of paradigm. So this is for me the main difference between old normal and new normal. The second one for me definitely is the definition of the collaboration between especially marketing, sales, and production procurement, facilitated by supply chain management. I think I do consider today that we have a sort of disconnection. We have people dreaming, and I am not criticizing at all, but you know, the question now in the new normal, probably, as my colleague with a webinar on business model said, we have to provide, I would say, I would use that normal or fair offer to the customers just to get the job done. And that's it. And maybe just to add a last one, but I'm not absolutely comprehensive on that. But the third one for me is definitely closer collaboration. Digitalization doesn't work if you don't increase and develop your collaborations at the interface of the different steps of my supply chain. So today we lack collaboration. We lack this notion of one team aligned around a common value roadmap, and then to make the right choice in terms of solutions. So for me, this is the main three, let's say, breakthroughs when you compare old normal versus new normal.
Thank you, Michel. We see notably in education that more than ever, the current situation we are facing put under the spotlight collaboration within the teams. So that's absolutely true. So Michel, thank you very much for your participation to this webinar and for all the insight that you share with us. And I will hand over now for the conclusion to Florent.
Yes, thank you very much, Nicolas. Thank you very much, Michel. On behalf of HEC Paris, I would like to thank you to take part in this conference. We hope you can join us for other webinars. Next Tuesday, 28th of April, we'll be discussing the financial crisis caused by COVID-19, the firm's funding difficulties, and reviewing the central bank policies. So thank you very much. See you soon.